The United States has vetoed a UN Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Both the U.S. and Israel believe a ceasefire would benefit Hamas. The U.S. says it offered amendments to that draft resolution that included a condemnation of the Hamas attacks.
Unfortunately, nearly all of our recommendations were ignored. And the result of this rush process was an imbalanced resolution that was divorced from reality, that would not move the needle forward on the ground in any concrete way. And so, we regretfully could not support it.
The U.S. explanation there for why it did not support that UN resolution calling for a ceasefire. David Hale is a former U.S. Special Envoy for Middle East Peace, and he joins us from Washington this morning. Mr. Hale, nice to see you.
Yes, nice to see you, Rosemary.
Let me start on that point there, that the U.S. on Friday vetoed a UN Security Council draft resolution because they say that the language did not encompass a condemnation of the actions of Hamas. How long can the U.S. hold that position, do you think?
Well, let me start by mentioning that I'm no longer with the State Department, so I'm not speaking for this administration.
Yes.
We've seen this episodes like this in the Security Council time and time again, where there is an element of tension between events on the ground and the United States' desire to allow Israel the time that it needs in order to eliminate the threat of, in this case, of Hamas, and the tension against an international community that is increasingly impatient and frustrated with the situation as Omar and others have described to you. I would underscore that a ceasefire that, the administration's position, and I agree with it, is that a ceasefire that leaves Hamas in place isn't really going to be a ceasefire. And so it's fine to have a debate in New York and adopt a resolution, but if it doesn't change the situation on the ground, it's not going to improve matters. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get to a point where a ceasefire call in New York would actually be implemented.
So beyond a ceasefire, and I take what you're saying in terms of how the U.S. is explaining it, but beyond a ceasefire, what can the U.S. do to try and get Israel beyond what we've seen for weeks now, calling them to be careful and to be more mindful of civilians? What else would the U.S. or should the U.S. be doing in order to try and protect civilians in Gaza?
Well, there isn't a lot that they can do. Of course, the point of this campaign is in response to the massacre on October 7. The IDF and the Israeli leadership announced right from the beginning that they would be moving militarily to eliminate Hamas. And eliminating Hamas requires attacks on civilian infrastructure and residences because Hamas is hiding behind them. They're using their own people as human shields.
Yeah.
So it's obviously a lot that we should be trying to do with Israel to encourage a minimalization of civilian casualties. But every operation in Gaza, sadly, and this, of course, is now the worst in my memory anyway, it does entail that. The easiest thing would be for Hamas to declare to give up its arms and give up the hostages that it's holding.
Reuters is reporting that there's the process for inspecting aid for Gaza at the Kerem Shalom crossing is being tested because, of course, that's the other component here, that not only are they being bombarded, but they are essentially being starved to death because of lack of humanitarian aid. How significant would it be if that Kerem Shalom crossing opened up?
Well, everything should be done to open all of the crossings and enable them to provide as much humanitarian and lifestyle support as not lifestyle, but living support as needed. That's difficult in a war zone. It's difficult because the Israelis will want to make sure that there isn't material going in that can support Hamas. But of course, it can be done and should be done.
Saw this week that delegation that were in Ottawa here in Canada yesterday, representatives from Palestinian Authority, Saudi Arabia and Turkey, but they did sort of the rounds around the world to talk with different people. What does that indicate to you in terms of the regional efforts to try and bring about some end to this?
Well, the regional states obviously are under enormous pressure from public opinion. I met with them. I actually moderated an event yesterday with the 4 Arab foreign ministers of Egypt, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan, all of whom I've known for many, many years. And, they arrived in Washington the day that they were also pursuing a Security Council resolution they knew the United States was going to veto. So I don't think their meetings necessarily were in the atmosphere that they had hoped. But in addition to expressing concerns and expressing a desired outcome of a two-state solution, I was pressing them to explain how we're going to get to that point, because these are going to be key partners in that. Qatar has been a key partner in using their relationships to try to bring hostage releases. Egypt and Jordan have been key partners in peace for decades. So they're going to have to help us find an actual durable outcome once this campaign is over.
What kind of role does the Palestinian Authority play in that? Because it does sound as though there are conversations happening with the Biden administration about whether they could somehow take on Gaza as well.
Well, in the long run, that's something we've all worked for, but there's an air of unreality, in my humble opinion, in the various ideas that are being floated. The Palestinian Authority is decrepit. It's corrupt. It has no real support from the people among the Palestinians, and it has absolutely no presence in Gaza except the civil servants whose salaries it pays. So I don't really see how Abu Mazen offers real solutions, and it's hard to invent a legitimate government out of thin air. So this is going to be really challenging, and I think one of the things that I'd like to hear is more independent Palestinian voices in Gaza being able to speak out about what future they want and how to work with them.
This is probably the impossible question, but I'll ask it anyway. What is the next thing that needs to happen to try and stop this from continuing? Because it's gone on for so long already.
At some point, as in the past, as in South Lebanon, as in previous campaigns in Gaza, the Israelis will reach a point in which they are wondering how to get out themselves, that they identified a very overarching goal of eliminating Hamas, but what does that really mean? And they're going to be looking for solutions, and that can begin with the transition period. While conflict's underway, diplomats and humanitarian workers and everyone involved should be identifying interim steps that can get us to where we want. What would be the role, for example, of the MFO? That's the International Peacekeeping Force in Sinai. Can they be doing a more effective job in helping Egypt secure the passages, including the various tunnels, so that there isn't any contraband coming in? An interdiction regime, which I negotiated and set up in 2008, that ended that conflict, 2008, 2009. We got a maritime regime in place with participation from all around the world, so that the Israelis felt confident that there was a real effort to stop the contraband of weapons and other material into Gaza.
And do you see any signs that Netanyahu is interested in that conversation or is starting that conversation in any way right now?
I don't see it now, but that time will come. Probably be another few weeks, and perhaps into the new year. I wish otherwise. I'm not. This is not my objective, but as a realistic analyst, I think that given what happened October 7, the Israelis are going to have to be very confident that they have put Hamas into a spot where it really can never do that kind of operation again.
Okay. David Hale, former U.S. Special Envoy for Middle East Peace, thank you so much for joining us from Washington this morning. We will come back to you, I'm sure, in the weeks ahead, if you don't mind, sir. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you.